Hey guys, this is Lucid. We are going to be doing a video where I go into detail on each of the nations. And I'm going to kind of give you my strength rating of each of them. The guy who organized this summer went and did a tier rating for all the nations as well. But yeah, this will probably be a kind of long video because we're going to talk about all of them. Okay, so first one is Nazmor, and this is basically a combination between Nazca and Airmore. The base nation for this... Oh god. Does it say? I might actually have to switch back and forth. 1 second. Okay, so this is built off of early age Airmore, as it turns out. His first pick was the Rakatapa, which is the most efficient. We banned the Scalarian Cultist, which, honestly, I take some credit for that. I obviously didn't have him banned, but I just think I'd like to take credit for just making the general community fully aware of how freaking broken Scalaria is and the importance of the Scalaria Cultist in that. So anyway, that is the only unit banned in this game, actually, which is odd. A few nations are banned, but there's still Reanimator Priests are not all banned. And then Rakatapa are not nearly as good as Scalarian Cultists at reanimating because you need to build a lab, which is expensive, and they cost more gold. But they're more versatile because they can also blood hunt, so they're an extremely valuable unit. So anyway, he's got this guy to reanimate undead, and he's going to get the Airmorian flavored undead, which means he's going to get, they're going to have better armor and shields, and some of them will have javelins, so they do get a nice little type of undead. So presumably he's going to be massing out a ton of these and spamming out a ton of undead. He's also going to have a very good blood economy. And I'm kind of, when we go through this, we're going to kind of talk about, I'm not going to go through and like jabber on about each unit. I'm going to talk about how I feel like the nation is going to play. So I think this is kind of the most important unit for how the nation will play. He's also got a Hurin Priest who can lead undead. I've been told, and I haven't tested this myself, but they mummify, and they will mummy, or they will mummify in-game. Somebody had said, though, that in their mummied form, they will not get undead back, which I find odd, but I'll choose to believe it. It would be worth testing, but anyway, I'll ask him maybe once the game gets going, if that's indeed true. But somebody said that they won't be able to, make undead, but they're still really good. Having a Flying Death too is great. Some of these can jump in communions and all that jazz. But the thought was that he could have two types of reanimators. So anyway, I don't know how that will actually play out, but that was kind of the idea. And then these guys can obviously lead a fair amount of undead. So, and they're highly mobile, so they can keep up with the undead. So that is a nice addition. The Master of 5 Elements, I think this was primarily for site searching. Though obviously you can throw these guys into communions to do important buffs later with the Crystal Matrix. And then he has Warlocks, presumably. Now these are, I believe, cap only, yeah. So this is going to be late game for horror spam. So he's got a blood economy. This is like one of the things he can do with the blood economy. He's got Akoya. These also mummify. And I'm not sure how this works, but I don't think they're going to be able to reanimate undead. But anyway, they're still a good unit. They're just a really good unit. Like, they get up to Earth 4 just with Power of the Spheres and Summon Earth Power, which is pretty sick that you can get to Earth. They're 300 gold Earth 4 without. Anyway, it's just good. So that's the Koya, and then they've got a Muke Scout, which is just a really good scout. Having an amphibious scout's really nice. They have the Augur, which is a cheap communion mage, so potentially they can throw blood into communions. They have these guys, which some of them can enter communions and do earth and death stuff. And then they've got these guys to enter and do astral earth and death stuff. So anyway, they have pretty good communions. A lot of this stuff that, if they use these guys as communion slaves, these guys are going to be casting a bunch of off-path stuff, so it's not going to be like a terribly efficient communion, but, you know, it'll be pretty strong. And then they have a Centurion, which is just a kind of cheap good leader. They have Millites, which are going to be good for initial expansion. He can mass a lot of them. These are just basic kind of Airmorian units. He's got the Infantry of Ulm. These are very high protection, gold, cheap, resource expensive, heavy infantry, which are just good. You know, they've got the flail hits twice, and it does very well against shields. I think this is the Agarthan light crossbowmen. And they have the Agarthan steel crossbow, which is better than the normal crossbow. It does more damage. It's not super high precision, but it's pretty good, and it's resource cheap, so they're pretty easy to mass, and they have decent armor. Not great, but okay. They have Raptorian warriors, which is nice to have flying units, and then they have a Sun Guard. The Sun Guard are kind of cool because they're going to be good bodyguards, which you can use in assassinations. And then just the mobility of having like all these flying mages plus potentially massing Raptorian warriors and then undead. It's just a lot of different threat vectors. You have to deal with like potentially massed undead. You have to deal potentially with heavy infantry and crossbow. And then you also potentially have to deal with flyers. And then if they want to go underwater, they've got these guys, which is pretty good. Like, first of all, they're just great base units because they come with fire and cold resistance, which means you don't really have to worry about a lot of the army wipe spells. And yeah, they have pretty good attack density because they're size 3 and have 2 high damage attacks that both scale with strength. And then they also have magic weapons. So this is just a really good troop. But it can also go underwater. He would have to put like Shambler skin on this guy, which is not in any way exorbitantly expensive to lead a big bunch of these guys underwater. So pretty good. I don't know if you're going to like win underwater with this guy. Like you're going to want mage support by the time you go underwater with these guys. But anyway, pretty flexible, pretty good. Next we have Bloody Mummy, the leader of Max Verney, which, I need to go and talk about what spells these guys got. Okay, so he got Summon Firebird, which these guys can do, and Strange Fires, which I'm not actually sure what that is, but I think it's Astral Fire, so that's probably what he's going to use his augurs for. I can actually look it up. Yeah, so Strange Fire does 24 damage, armor piercing fire damage, I think, and area of effect 3, so pretty good. Especially with all the undead stuff that's probably going to be out there. But like, if you have like elite undead units, Strange Fire is kind of going to nuke the shit out of it. So anyway, that's his spell. Things that are available pretty early in terms of the research, and then he got the Gar, I forget the name of it, but basically it's the lightning thing. It's a little Tingem item that lets you cast Lightning Bolt. So, good in a lot of situations. Anyway, that's a Nazcan, the leader of Nazmor. And then we have Bloody Mummy. So, this is Max Verney. And this nation, I believe... Yeah, and so this starts off with Marverni as the base nation, which means they're going to get Boar of Carnutes, and then some of the tattoo stuff is and all their spells, which is probably why they got like the Sara, Mounty, and Cataphract, because they can do the Awaken tattoo stuff. So anyway, they're going to have Boar stuff later, so we're looking for like sacred strategies here. They've got a Flagellant, which was their first pick, so presumably they're going to have a Bless that is good on a Boar and good on a Flagellant. I'm honestly not super sure what it would be. Like maybe larger. Larger would be pretty good on flagellants. So that's my first guess. It's probably larger, and then I don't know what else. Maybe some defensive buff. Like, I'm not sure what. Bark skin with some fire resistance. I don't know. Probably not going to do bark skin on top of larger though. So I'm not really sure what they're going to do for their bless, but I imagine it would include larger. So if we look at the units, they've got Hoberg Crossbow, which is going to give you, it's one of the highest crossbow, or it's one of the best ways to turn gold into crossbows. And then you can pack them really densely, so they take Strength of Giants buffs pretty well. They've got the Flagellant, which is just, mass sacreds. They've got this guy, the Foresters, who are really good stealthy raiders. They've got short bows and then pretty high attack density in melee. So, 20 of these guys shooting things and then chopping them up when they close do pretty good in melee. Let's look at his stealthy commanders he's got. No leadership. This guy could lead 10. That's not really enough, I don't think. Maybe the Earth randoms potentially doing like Iron Warriors or something on like a squad of 10 Foresters would be good. They've got Ways, which are one of my favorite units. I mean, Ways are just so good. And they're also stealthy commanders. So these guys potentially could lead like 10 Foresters and then do Wooden Warriors on them and then swarm. And that would actually be pretty scary. And then Ways, I mean, they're just such a good unit. They really are good. Yeah, they can do, like, Blackheart, you can turn them into Swarm Assassins, bunch of things. Just good units. They've got Dryads too, which are stealthy nature leaders. These are the late age Dryads, so they're cheap. But yeah, these potentially could... this is probably his default leader, I would guess. For the Foresters, because, you know, you don't have the leadership penalty. You can do more of them. You throw a Thistle Mace on these guys and they drop, or just a gem, and they drop Wooden Warriors on a bunch of Foresters. And then they're going to be pretty damn good. Like, they're going to chew through a lot of PD. They're not going to do well against Thugs or a bunch of other things, but they'll do okay. You know, the Axes are pretty high attack density. So that is the Dryad. And then they've got the Raven Guard, which are very killy birds. They've got pretty good protection, and then they've got very high attack density, for birds anyway. And they're stealthy, which is kind of like the icing on the top. So they're very good at killing PD. They just jump in the back and murder everything, and it's very hard to kill them before they're going to kill you, and then they sneak away, and that's it. I'm not sure who he's going to have leading them, because he doesn't have... This is his only flying stealthy leader, so he would have to do like 10 of these guys with one of these, and 10 is kind of not a lot. Like, 10 is not enough to get like the full swarm effect. So I'm not totally sure what he's thinking here with who is going to lead them. He could put them on a Dryad, but then you lose some of the flying maneuverability. But anyway, you have more leadership and you can put a lot more on. So anyway, that's the Raven Guard. He's got the Saramati and Cataphract, which are going to benefit from the Tattoo Bless from Marverni, and they're going to be pretty good at expanding. Just heavy cav expansion generally works pretty well, almost no matter what heavy cav you have. And then he's got these guys who are Van Heers, and basically they can take a Bless. So if he's got a kind of killy Bless, which is going to be good on Flagellants, well, it's going to be good on Van Heers as well. And these guys just will chop through any tough stuff you're going to come attack them with. So if you're coming at them with some kind of super combatant, they're going to do pretty good. And then finally he has the Androd, or whatever you call it. But basically these are coastal recruits. So any of his coastal forts, he'll be able to make these guys. And they're pretty good at going underwater. They're a little expensive, but basically they're like mine blasters that have kind of decent melee attacks. Yeah. So those are the troops. For the mages, we have the very good air assassin. So these guys summon air elementals generally when they assassinate, though you could certainly have them do other things. But anyway, they have good assassins. They have shamans, and I'm trying to remember what makes shamans good. I guess being stealthy and then good mages. He has a lot of stealthy stuff he can do. So I'm not... I mean, the Earth cross paths, I mean, the Earth, double Earth obviously is going to be good on a stealthy mage. I'm not sure what the other cross paths are for, and they're inept researchers. There could be something I don't know about this shaman and why they're particularly good here. I mean, they have a lot of survivals and they're stealthy. I could see why they would be good. I'm not sure what he's planning on using them for. The ways we already talked about. These guys, the Raphite Sages, are important because they are very good researchers and they come in very useful varieties because they basically have Fire 2, Earth 2, and Astral 2, which is really nice. So anyway, these are probably his main research mage, and they are all going to be useful in combat. The Dryads, again, more assassination options. So when you attack him, you have really two types of assassins. You have to be able to survive air elementals, and you have to survive swarm. Pretty difficult to come up with something that's going to reliably survive both. So that is scary. And then he has Sarumancers. And Sarumancers are going to be very good Skelly spammers. They can do Foul Vapors. They can do a bunch of things. Anyway, that's just another thing to kind of add to his arsenal, is to deal with Skelly spam. And then finally, we have Melquarts. These are the Baratos variety of Melquarts. And so they have, basically they can Cloud Trapeze, which is really nice. You do have to worry about Mind Hunt with these guys. And I don't think, he doesn't really have a lot of Astral. He has these guys, and I think that's about it for Astral. So Mind Hunt would be a problem, I think, for this nation. You know, potentially he can Shade Mail Halberg these guys, but I don't even think he has, does he have, no, these guys can do Shade Mail Halbergs, so potentially he can kind of deal with that, but it's a little tricky and it's kind of expensive, and Mind Hunts will probably work pretty well, especially if you're not worried about getting the occasional Feeble-Minded. So what do I think of this? I think, you know, any nation that can do boars is going to be kind of a threat. He has a lot of different threat vectors, but he doesn't really have, like, this isn't like a, there's not a, I mean, aside from the boars, and he's probably going to have a pretty good bless. I think this is a nation with a lot of flexibility. It's not a nation with, like, one thing it has to do. But then again, that kind of brings some problems, like, you know, you only have so much money, so how much are you going to put in Assassins? How much are you going to put in Sarumancers? You know, how much are you going to put into Ways to get a blood economy going? How much are you going to put into Melkort super combatants? But anyway, it's a good problem to have. So he's going to have to decide what he's going to do, but he's got a lot of good options to deal with a lot of things. And I'm actually going to border him, as I think we find out in the next episode. But so anyway, that is Max Fernie. Going on to the next dude, we have me, which we've talked about. And I guess we'll go ahead and talk about me again. We've already kind of done the national overview. But I'm less flexible. I'm more committed to basically doing Skelly spam and then having elite crossbowmen. These are the most killy of all the crossbowmen because they have 15 piercing damage. They're also pretty far range, but they have lower attack output per turn. But heavily damaging weapons. So, and then I have cheap archers. So if we're fighting a bunch of shitty stuff, then I'm going to be using these archers. If I'm fighting elite stuff, I'm going to be using a lot of crossbowmen. The archers with flaming arrows are going to be doing way more damage per turn than these guys will, unless we're fighting elite stuff. And then I was thinking, like, if we're fighting elite stuff, I don't really care about the fire rate. I just need to be doing a shit ton of damage when I hit. And these definitely accomplish that. It is very hard to ignore 15 piercing, armor-piercing damage. And then we have these guys who just hit like tanks, and they're actually pretty damn sturdy in Cold Dominion. So, the thing I'm really missing is good expansion. I'd cut off a finger to replace my Royal Navigator with a good expander troop. I really would. I also don't have cheap commanders, but, you know, presumably you can get indie commanders for that, which are fine. Anyway, what are you going to do? It's what we got. But yeah, I've got the Jotun Scouts, which can do a bunch of different roles. They can also be, because I've taken Undying as part of my Bless, they're going to be really good commanders for leading undead. And I can put weapons on them, and they're kind of thuggy too when surrounded by a bunch of undead, so they can deal with a bunch of things that other people may throw at me. We've got a good commander here that can potentially lead troops underwater, including undead. So we've got the Thaumaturg for reanimating, and then Astral Death Communions. We've got the Warrior Smith for producing a bunch of gear on the cheap. He can make a bunch of different things. He can make my quills cheap, my lanterns cheap, any of my reinvigoration gear cheap. Water lenses and water bracelets he can make super cheap. So anyway, there's a bunch of stuff I'm not mentioning he can make cheap, obviously, but and then some of these are pretty useful in combat, like all the Earth 2s are pretty useful because they can do summon Earth Power, and then they can drop Strength of Giants and Legions of Steel and stuff like that. And then I'm not sure what are the other cross paths I would particularly want in combat. I'd have to think about that more. But super good to have on my roster. The Nahuli, who are one of my favorite mages. Flying, nature, astral, so they can do a bunch of fun stuff. But Notably, they can enter my communions and do personal regeneration, which is just really nice to have. It really can, being able to kind of do light turbo communions, which is something I'm planning on doing. These guys are super valuable. They can also drop in and do swarm, and they're highly mobile, so I can just add just a ton of swarms to a particular fight if I feel like I need to. So yeah, that's the Nahuli. Very glad to have them. We've got the Shadow Seer. This is more like a late game unit. Starting off with Astral, it's basically a very cheap Astral 3, which means they can teleport without any gear, which is really nice. So I can potentially do teleport and slave shenanigans with these guys. They're also stealthy, so I don't have to worry about them getting magic-phased attack. They can do teleport and slave, and then I can just sneak them away, basically completely safe. So that is really, really good. And then also being stealthy, they can hide and prevent anybody from ever mind hunting any of my guys, which is going to be nice. Particularly my Scrotty. Next, we have the High Magus, and this just gives me access to Earth Astral, which is really important. It also gives me access to Astral Fire, which is going to give me Firebirds. I have Firebirds as my national spell, so that's important. And then they also are going to be, once entering my communion, able to do flaming arrows on top of my good archers, which is really good. Yeah, these guys are pretty important. I do not want to give them up. I would have preferred, I think, to have the cheaper variety, but I'm okay with this. And yeah, once these guys get Earth Boots, they can make a Crystal Coin, and then a Starshine Skullcap will be up. So that gives us 2 of the Astral Boosters, and then on top of this guy, then we'll be up to Astral 5, which is pretty good. We're not up to the critical Astral 6, so we may have to empower one of these guys, or I have to figure something else out to get up to the critical Astral 6, which then we're actually kind of stuck at again. I mean, if we empower one of these guys, then he can make a Ring of Sorcery, and then Ring of Sorcery plus Crystal Coin plus this, the Starshine Skullcap on an Astral 4 because we empowered. He'll be up to Astral 7, so then that person can then make a Ring of Wizardry, which won't get us up to Astral 8, but anyway, it's an important booster to be able to have access to. All that's really expensive. I don't know how much we'll do any of that, but anyway, we have pretty high Astral. I mean, these guys also can drop super efficient turn 1 anti-magics, which is really nice. It's just a good mage, but it's not going to be very useful early. We talked about the High Magus, the Dryad, doing Dryad things, easy to foul vapors. We can use water elementals in assassinations too if we want to with a water lens. So if you think about it, like Swarm with that 1 nature gem, and then we put a water lens on her, and then we do summon water elemental, she passes out. We may or may not need water bottle, but that's really cheap. And a water lens for this person is like a very cheap version of a water bottle, because it's like 8 gems versus 3 if you're looking at hammer costs. So it's just, different threat vectors for assassination that they'd have to deal with. The Scrotty, which I'm really digging, it gives me... Scrotty are on the light end of super combatants. They're so good. Especially once fluffed, it's just a really good chassis. So yeah, with fluffing, they are on the light end of super combatants. But without fluffing, they're on the heavy end of thugging. So very good. But they're going to be scratching a lot of itches for me. First of all, they're going to be my blood hunters. They are going to be potentially turbo communion slaves. They have the death... I'm trying to think, what are the important crosspaths they have? They're going to be my Pearl, Claim of Pearls Forgers. They're my only... Or no, we also have Dryads. But the nature randoms can do the Armor of Twisting Thorns. They're also going to be my Illwinter caster since I'm Niflheim. So there were quite a few reasons I wanted the Scrotty. They can do a ton of different things. They can jump in communions as masters and cast personal regen if I don't have any Nahuli around. Yeah, and then obviously they're probably the best turbo communions in the game. Because basically once they're in their werewolf form, they have regeneration. You could even stack regeneration by giving them a ring if you wanted to. and then you can get the buff on them from the communion itself. So you can get them up to like 30% regeneration with like 50 HP if you stack some HP items on them. It gets a little crazy. Next, we have the Royal Navigator. This is one I probably should have dropped. It's cap only, which I didn't realize. I thought I could get them everywhere. They're sailing, which is nice, but we don't really have a ton of water on this map. But yeah, I would totally have traded this guy for a better expander. I really wish I did that. Oh well. Why I got them is I can drop air into my communions. They're not slow to recruit, so that's good. But I can also do, by having water, air, astral, I can do freezing mist in my communions, which is going to be, I think, pretty good for, you know, it's like they have to have a lot of cold resistance or they're just dead. Because freezing mist is, like, cold resistance blocks it, but aside from that, it's armor negating, and it's got lingering, so I don't know. It just does a ton of damage. I just wanted to throw that in. I think this honestly was a mistake, but we'll find out. And then we have the Eagle King for turn 1 mass flight. And then, obviously, they can raid and cloud trapeze, but Eagle Kings are awesome. Just super stoked to have the Eagle Kings. So you can see I'm kind of doing a lot of things up here. I really wish I had one more unit. I'm not sure which one I would have gotten, but having a resource cheap expander would be just the shit instead of this guy. So not perfect, but anyway. For our spells, we've got Summon Firebird, and we've got... what is the other one? Power of the Sepulchre for our undead. And of course, because we're... Niflheim is our base nation, our dominion spreads cold, and we get giants. Both soulless giants and long-dead giants. Next up, we have Papa Palpatine, which is Yaminam. And I'm not exactly sure what that is. I think this is Yomi. Let me double check. Yeah, so this is Yomi. So, unfortunately, they're going to get the gold penalty, which is just freaking horrible if you ask me. I would never pick Yomi as a base nation. The free spawn you get from Yomi is not worth it. They have these guys who, if they ever have enough money to recruit them, they can capture slaves, which is nice. So they have a few sources of free spawn, which is nice. They've got Senshai Anakites, which is cool. And then they've got Hellet crossbows, which are, upkeep-wise, they're the most efficient crossbows in the game. And they've also got really good armor. So I wanted these. I was going to get these instead of my crossbows. Because I care a lot about upkeep. They have really shitty morale, though. So those are their units. They've got the Enkidu Scout, which is pretty cheap, good survivals. I don't really know why they got them. This doesn't seem terribly good to me. But who am I to say? They've got the Ninja, which is a good assassin because it can scale walls. What scale walls means is when you're sieging a fort, you can actually assassinate people inside the fort. You can always assassinate people inside a fort if you're not sieging it, but this lets you do it while you're sieging, which is kind of cool. They've got the Magus, which is like the cheaper version of what I have with the High Magus. They've got the Magister, which is immune to Drain, so they can go Drain 3. So when you're dumping your scales, this is good to have. They're a Mason, which is kind of nice, so they can upgrade your forts. And yeah, a lot of them are going to get Magic Pass. I think this is set up so you don't need a lab to get them either. And then they have castle bonuses, so this is a pretty damn good unit. I kind of would have liked to have had that if I... And maybe there's a unit I could have gotten instead. The Occultist, which is really good. You've got Death, Blood, and Astral. So you can throw these in communions. They can Skelly spam. They can do Reinvigoration. These guys are good. They're old, which kind of sucks. How old are they? They're not that old. Sorcerer of the Sands. Kind of good for just path access. The Fire, I mean, I don't know. I'm not really a huge fan of this. I mean, they're good when you need path access, but I wouldn't ever really mass produce them, and they're old, so I'm not a huge fan of the Sorcerer of the Sands. Wizard of the Crescent Moon. The thing is, they're playing Yomi, and they're getting kind of a lot of expensive mages that aren't really super efficient. So I'm not really digging that part. Like, Wizard of the Crescent Moon, okay, they can jump in your communions, and they can do water stuff. Also old. I don't really necessarily get it. They've got this guy who's a healer, so this is going to combat some of the old age stuff. But then, you know, they're kind of expensive. They can turn nature into death gems, which is kind of cool. So they can have a ton of death gems. And I think this nation got consuls. So anyway, they can take their nature income, they can turn them into death gems. And I guess crank out a ton of consuls, which, you know, that's nice to have. And then they have the Wormwood Witch. So this is like a nation full of witches, is what it really is. A bunch of like random sorcerers. These guys can Cloud Trapeze, which is nice. So they can Cloud Trapeze and Swarm, they can Cloud Trapeze and Air Elemental, and then if you get the Death Randoms, they can Cloud Trapeze and Skeleton Spam. You know, not bad, but it's expensive, and it's not like super impactful for the money you're getting. It's like nice. And the problem is when you're playing Yomi, you don't really have enough money for the nice stuff. And then finally the Black Rose Sorceress, which I feel like a lot of this is redundant. You know, because this is like, now these can enter communions again, you know, and then potentially put nature stuff on it, like personal region. I just feel like there's a ton of redundancy in this mage lineup, and it's all, none of it, okay, like the Occultist is value, the Magister's value, the Magus is value, but a lot of these guys are like, they're expensive, they're not, a lot of them aren't sacred, so they're going to have a high upkeep. Like, I just feel like this nation's going to be just so poor. And then they have the Flagrant Tyrant, who can capture slaves and is a super combatant in his own right. And then they have the Windcaller, who can Cloud Trapeze and has Sailing, which is kind of nice. I feel like there's just a ton of redundancy in this mage lineup, but it'll be interesting to see what they can do. Coming down, we've got Doom and Gloom, which is the pretender of Yenam. Anyway. This base nation, let's figure it out. Okay, so the base nation here is Theodoros. So that sucks because you're going to get a big income hit. But you get free spawn, which is good. He's got the best underwater super combatants. He's got this guy, and then he's got this guy, which isn't really a super combatant, but anyway, you get them underwater. These guys are, by the way, just awesome. They're really cool. Yeah, so anyway, he's got these guys, which is pretty good because in some ways he's just denying them from other nations to be able to come under the water with them. Like I was probably gonna get the Fomorian King instead of the Eagle King, but he got nabbed up. But in some ways I'm okay with that. I don't really want the underwater that much. King of the Deep, Middle Age Atlantis, one of the best recruit anywhere mages. Problem is they're expensive, and he's playing Theodoros, which tends to be poor as shit. The Ducados, which is pretty good just because they're really good researchers. And then they're all pretty useful. They get a bunch of useful paths. Starchild, one of the best assassins in the game. Coral Queen, very good for maintaining your dominion and claiming thrones and whatnot. And then some Siege Chaff, or Agarthan commanders here. Presumably to command some of these guys. He's got the Meteorite Guard, one of my favorite troops in the game. Very good. Very high damage, piercing magic spear, which is super good. And then good armor too. They're resource expensive though. I think it's going to be hard for him to like truly mass these with his population dying. Though the resource requirement won't really be the thing that kills him. It's going to be more the recruitment points. Pale One Militia, this is just cheap siege chaff. But he's kind of got ghosts. But, you know, having a few... These guys go a long way with the siege bonus for... Like, for 6 gold, these are some of your best bang for your buck siege chaff. And then he's got the Myrmidian, which is a formation fighter with recruitment, with recuperation, and then very good protection. So these are kind of like... I feel like in a lot of ways... I don't know if he's wanting to expand with these. Maybe. They're probably really good at expanding. But, yeah, they're going to be more resource efficient than the Meteorite Guard for expanding, I think. Anyway. The thing is, you kind of need poison resistance for your expanders, so maybe he's going to use the Troll Guard. These are pretty expensive, but they expand pretty well. So maybe he's going to use these guys for expansion. And then he's got the Great Ulm, which are amphibious mine blasters. So anyway, he's got a bunch of different things. A lot of these are expensive. I think he's going to be limited in terms of like how much he can afford to get of all this. But, you know, the pop kill for Theodoros is not like with Airmore. You still are going to have population. It's just, if you're not expanding, you're going to kind of be, your income graph's going to go down, right? Whereas everybody else is going to be going up. So in some ways, you're kind of playing against the clock. Theodoros gets some good spells. So like anytime we have an Earth Mage, so like these guys can get Earth randoms, and then these guys get Earth randoms, so they can be doing So Dragon Teeth. And then these guys are, yeah. Anyway, these are Basalt Kings are really good super combatants too. So if we look at his spells, he's got Wrath of Ancestors, which who the hell is going to cast that? He doesn't have any Death Mages except the Fomorian King. Very weird to get Wrath of Ancestors and not have Death Mages. I mean, honestly, you can just get Revenants. They can cast it, and they're pretty cheap, but not super synergistic here. And then he has, as his final spell, what was it? Yeah, as his final spell, he has Hall of Statues, which, again, not very easy for him to cast with these guys. No, this guy could do Hall of Statues. So he doesn't have to take it on his Pretender, but, you know, I mean, it's nice. Hall of Statues is a good spell. Potentially, if you're planning on putting up, like, some battle, like, Hall of Statues with this guy who can do Acid Storm, it's going to be pretty good. Yeah, so, you know, kind of scary. Anyway, that is Doom and Gloom. Then we have Bill the Infinite, the Pretender of Astralarium. And this is based off of middle-aged Arco. So they get the Arco stuff like cheap labs. Yeah, so let's take a look at the units. They have the Stalker, which also has Scale Wall, one of the best assassins in the game. Pretty damn cheap too, 60 gold. Somehow it's only one recruitment point. Seems like a bug. Then they've got the the Mouth of God, which is a stealthy preacher, which is just nice to have stealthy preachers for Dominion control. The Garnet Priestess. I don't know why they got... Why would you get this as a... Yeah, I'm not sure. It's not a bad unit, but I would almost think you could always get something better. The Conjurer. These are pretty good. You know, they can get they can jump in communions and do skelly spam. And Sabbath communions are pretty good. So I don't know, you could do Conjurer, Sabbath communions. They've got the Sage, very efficient researcher, one of the best researchers in the game. The Arcane Commander, which is basically this the warrior, sorcerer warrior unit. I forget what they're called, but I think they renamed it here. I am honestly not that impressed with these guys. I've tried thugging them out. I'm sure they can thug, but I find they're not very thug efficient. Like, you end up needing to put a fair amount of gear to get them to survive. Honestly, I see these guys die all the time. I've seen other people use them, and they tend to die. They've got the Sorcerer, which is basically the same thing as the Conjurer, except they get random paths to add. I think this is like super redundant. I definitely wouldn't get both of them. Lore Keeper, like a bunch of path access and good researchers, but like I end up stopping recruiting the lore keepers in most of my games. Like, I'll get a few of them to get some random cross path I didn't have. Or maybe I get even more if I really need them to research. But they're expensive and they have a ton of upkeep. And most of them aren't very useful in combat. So I'm not like, they're nice, but I feel like you've already got good researchers. Like, do you really need every random cross path? You've already got like a lot of cross paths too with like this guy. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a fan of the Lore Keeper pickup. The Calum Smith, that's kind of cool. You get resource bonus and forge bonus. So these are kind of nice to have. It's going to allow you to pop out more mages. And then you've got the Moon Mage, which, okay, you can jump in a Communion and do other stuff. Like you can throw in Earth Power to his Conjure Communion, which is kind of nice. And then you have Astral to do Power of the Spheres. And then they can jump in and do Skelly Spam. So, like, this would be a small upgrade for the Skelly Spam Communion. And then you've got basically Heavy Infantry, more Heavy Infantry, and then you've got these guys who are going to shoot. My guess, this is my guess of how it's going to play. You're going to have a lot of Assassins, then you're going to have Skelly Spam Communion, which is basically the only thing they're going to do. And then you're going to... Somebody here probably has fire. Maybe you take... I don't know. So there's not even a really reliable way to get air. So I was thinking this was going to be like Tower Guard, which is what this base unit is, with like Skelly Spam in front of them, and then the Tower Guard are going to be mostly immune to missile fire because they're really good at that because they have a shield. So it's going to be like Tower Guard shooting over Skelly Spam, which is a good idea. It's a little one-dimensional, but like it's a good idea. But then like a lot of things are missing. Like there's not really very easy access to flaming arrows or to wind guide, which are the things you would probably want there. So I'm not sure. I'm not a huge fan of this. But we'll see. You never know what the other player's thinking of. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Okay, next we have the Alliance, and this is based off of MA Pythium. So I think they get a buff to... Maybe it's LA Pythium that gets the buff to poison resistance in their Bless. I don't think MA does, but... I'm not sure of all the stuff Pythium gets. They get some cool astral summons, right? Like all the angel stuff, so that's pretty cool. They get all the big angel stuff. I think he went for his spells Sow Dragon Teeth, which all the Imperial Geomancers are going to be able to drop. And then he also went for Summon Firebirds, which the fire randoms here are going to be able to do. So let's take a look at the units. We've got Slayer Worms, which are one of the few Sacred Assassins in the game. So if he takes a pretty cool Bless, these guys can be just abysmal to deal with. And you can recruit them everywhere. So anyway, they are really, really annoying to deal with. And that's kind of a theme of this game, is everybody's going to have really annoying assassins. The Chud Jarl, which is just a good, cheap, upkeep Holy One commander. The Imperial Geomancer, one of the better mages in the game. Very good at researching, especially if you take magic, and then this is one of the best cross paths for Communion. They've got the Mystic, which is to add a bunch of other stuff to Communions, like fire magic and then water magic. We've already got Earth and Astral. And then obviously you get some of those cross paths too. They've got the Camazot, which means you can add blood to the Communion, and these guys are just sick all around. I love Camazot. So also adds air potentially to your Communion if you jump in with the Sabbath. And then these guys, you don't even really need them in a normal Communion. You can just Skelly Spam with these guys, especially the Death randoms. Blood randoms you probably use for blood hunting. Yeah, these are just a great unit. Next we have the Galderman. These guys are kind of cool. They can all Cloud Trapeze. And then you've got a bunch of different useful, like Earth Air is a useful cross path. Air Death is a useful cross path. And then Air Blood, potentially you can do some like Robe of the Magi stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's a reasonably priced Air Mage. You know, you can Cloud Trapeze and potentially even Thug with these guys, especially like the Earth randoms, because they have regen built in. So, like, especially if you throw on a Coral Sword where you get them up to like 3 regen a turn and they have a little bit of a bigger HP pool. And then you give them some decent armor, and then they do like Iron Skin and then protection from light, you know, like whatever it is you think you're going to need. These guys are potentially Cloud Trapezing thugs. But then they have the Van Jarl, who are the real Cloud Trapezing thugs. So I guess these guys are like more... Yeah. utility mages, and these guys are going to be the cloud trapezing thugs, because these are way better cloud trapezing thugs than the Galdermen. But yeah, so they can cloud trapeze. There's a bunch of stuff you can do with Van Charles. They're just good thugs. They're stealthy too, which is really nice. Then you have Wind Lords, who are presumably going to be leading the Zayadins. And Zayadin expansion is, of course, very efficient because Zayadins are really, really strong. So Wind Lords are a pretty good candidate for somebody to lead them. They're basically flying sacred good commanders. Next we have the Astrologer, which are very high astral mages. And then they're going to have other paths that they can add into a communion. They're also fortune tellers, which is kind of nice. You can only recruit them in the capital, but that's fine. And then they have the Oracle of the Dead, which is cap only. But basically you're going to get Big Earth, which opens up things like, you know, a bunch of turn 1 earthquakes or other stuff. And then I think this is the highest death magic that this nation gets. I know they have the Kamazot. So no, it's probably mostly just for the Earth Path, and then they're Holy 3 too, so they can claim thrones. They've got the Burgmeister Guard, which is really cool, size 1, and then really high protection and defense. So these guys take buffs extremely well, but they're also vulnerable to evocation. They're a pretty good frontline unit if you can mass them. Furblog Warrior, this is probably mostly for initial expansion, though they may use them later for other things. They've got the Kappa to go underwater, and then the Zayden for expansion. I think we already talked about their spells. I think this is a very strong mid-game nation, like mid and early. They're going to have very good expansion with the Zayadins and the Wind Riders. And then, like, Skelly Spam's going to be pretty good when it comes online. And Imperial Geomancers are going to be good all game. And then Earthquake Traps are going to be really good. And they're going to have some blood. I think this is a pretty well-balanced nation that's going to be pretty good through most of the game. But I don't see them being, like, overwhelmingly strong at any particular part. Like, there's... The Slayer Worms are good, yeah. And he's going to have a pretty good bless probably for the Zayden, so... I don't know how he'll kit these guys up, but potentially they can be pretty scary little thugs. Yeah, so I think this will do pretty well in all portions of the game. I wouldn't say I'm, like, terrified of fighting them, but anyway, that's what we got. And then we've got, so that was the founder. Next up we have Kronos, who's the god of Othyris. And so these guys are Ime Agartha. Now what's odd is I don't really see many way, I mean they're going to have all the Agarthan summons, right? So by default they're going to get access to, you know, Hall of Statues and all that stuff. So there's some built-in synergy where they get all that. Like the nation itself is inherently synergistic. They get an Earth Bless bonus, which is nice. And then if we look at the units, they've got Black Centaur, which is probably what they're going to expand with. Very, very good for initial expansion. Very scary in early wars. They've got Black Knights. These guys are better... I don't know. These are good troops, and you can definitely mass them and put them in an army, and they're solid. They've got the Furblug Warrior, which is also good for expansion, so I'm not totally sure... Like, if they're resource constrained, they probably are going to want Black Centaur. If they're not resource constrained, they're probably going to want a Black Knight. I don't know if these are just kind of like reasonably efficient siege chaff or like what the purpose of the Furblug Warrior is. It seems a little redundant with these because they've already got like resource constrained, not resource constrained. Then they've got the Mountain Warrior, and this is like your elite killer. Very, very high attack density, so I do support that. And then they've got this guy who is a castle defense bonus, but that's kind of a meh trait. But they've got good protection and stuff, but this also is like, okay, you can expand with these guys, or you can expand with these guys if you're resource constrained. I bet you, honestly, these guys are better. Maybe this is just like a hold the line troop, because these guys are not really hold the line. So maybe like if you're fighting a bunch of archers, you want somebody with a shield that's going to hold the line. The Black Knights could do it, but maybe you can't make a line big enough, so you want these guys. Not totally sure on the troops. A little bit seems redundant, but I mean, these are all good troops, so I'm just not totally sure in which case you would want each of them. Like, they seem to both kind of... There seems to be a fair amount of overlap. But, like if they went this guy and this guy and this guy, I would get it. Or if they went, like, this guy and this guy and this guy, I would get it, because this guy's, like, not a lot of resources, so you'd expand with this guy and maybe that guy, and then you get that guy later. Anyway, I don't know. So, let's continue looking. They've got the Nakam, which is the most efficient blood hunter in the game. They've got the Shaman, which these are just great little researchers. They're very, very, very good baseline researchers because they're sacred, have an okay amount of research points, and then they're pretty useful. Shamans are useful because, like, big nature astral communions are nice. We've got the Colossi Storm Captain, Cloud Trapeze. He can thug, he can sail and lead armies. Very versatile mage. And commander. Then they've got this guy, the Witch Hunter, which I actually dig. So more stuff to kind of do in communions. But this opens up like Pillar and Fire stuff for the late game. I dig these guys. Marshmaster for various kinds of Skelly spam and, more importantly, Foul Vapor cheese. And then they've got the High Seraph, which for big air magic. Probably why they got them. You also have this is probably going to be the best water access on the nation too. A lot of these guys are now cap. Oh no, High Seraph isn't cap only. I thought it was. Pan, great unit. Summons Meneids. Very, very solid. Good nature, earth access. I mean, honestly, you're going to have a lot of nature from this guy and like communions, and from this guy. So the nature is not super awesome, but the earth is really nice. You're going to need it to summon like Hall of Statues and things like that if you're going to use the Agartha spells. And then Bride in Waiting, these guys are awesome. Cloud Trapeze, Summon Fire Elementals, Flaming Arrows, and Wind Guide, but they don't really have a ton of archers. So they could still use indies, but these guys are great in combination with archers, but they're also good for flying, or, Cloud Trapezing in and summoning elementals. And then they've got the Melkort. I believe this is the Hinnom variety. Yeah, the Astral variety. They're good super combatants. What can I say? I love them. For their spells, they got Revive Lemur, which Lemur Console. So there's going to be a lot of Immortal Death guys running around early. And then they also got Summon Condors, which I don't know if they're planning on taking an Air Bless. I guess they can get these guys to summon Condors. But anyway, they're good siege dudes, and they take a bless well. But I'm guessing there's kind of a light, thuggy kind of bless they take for the Melkorts and for the Black Centaur, and that's kind of it. But anyway, this will be interesting to see what they do. I wouldn't say this is, like, super strong, but they have really strong components, so I think it'll be more about kind of what they choose to do with it. Because, like, they have access to a lot of the big buffs. Like, they can do all the astral buffs, like Will of Fates, do the nature buffs, mass protection. They can do the earth buffs, Army of Gold. They can do Fog Warriors, mass flight. They have super combatants. They have Skelly spam. They have Foul Vapors. There's a lot they can do. But I think it'll just be kind of interesting to see what they actually do. Coming down here, what is Blood? Theodod. This is, I think, probably the scariest of the nations. They've got Seshi, or no, the non-berserking Anakites, so you can scare these guys away, which is useful. Especially for us, if we get rushed by them, we have death, so we can potentially spam out Frighten and just get them to run. The Berserker ones, you can't do that. They're very killy, they hurt a lot, they're hard to kill. He's playing as middle-aged Satis, which is the nation I wanted to get. But I wasn't early enough in the draft. And that means he gets bonus income, and he poisons everybody. Now, the rule for the Satis Dominion is if you're sacred, you're fine. So this guy, even though he's not cold-blooded or swamp immune, or like swamp survival, he's not going to get diseased. But like the Mastersmith is not sacred, it's not swamp survival, and it's not swamp survival or cold-blooded. any of those things would trick it to like not getting poisoned, but the Master Smiths are going to get poisoned or like diseased. He's also got Knights of the Chalice, so he's got a Recruit Anywhere Sacred, a Cap Only Nasty Sacred. He's got bonus income. And yeah, that's going to be scary. He's got these guys who I think are immune to Drain Scales. Which is not listed here, but I think it's built into this. But anyway, he's going to have pretty good researchers, because they're all going to research even with Drain. Then he's got Black Harpies for scouting. Engineers, these are just masons to upgrade his forts. So it's going to be really hard to siege down Satis forts in Satis Dominion, because you're going to be getting all diseased up. He's got Filigran Priests. These guys are pretty cool just because they've got Unrest Reduction 2. So potentially these guys are some of the best kind of components for a good blood economy. He has the Aits for his Blood Hunters. He's got the Abba, who are healers, so he can heal up any thugs or super combatants he has, or any of his elite troops. So these guys are going to be getting a lot of experience and presumably not terribly diseased or afflicted. We already talked about the Aits, which are useful too for just jumping in communions. They're kind of like weaker versions of Camazotz, but they're also cheaper. And in communions, these guys are better gold-wise than Camazotz. He's got the Ashipu, who are pretty good because they're disease healers, and then they're also just pretty cheap astral nature mages. These guys are just good. What does it say in their thing? Oh, they know how to banish. I don't know if that lore has any flavor. They can banish a disease demon. Then he's got the Master Smith, which boom is one of the best mages in the game. Like, it changes how you play because you get all fire and earth things and then some astral and air things for 1 gem, which is just retardedly good. It's like, if you compare, I've got a Smith 2 with a forge bonus of 1, but the difference between 2 and 1 is the difference between paying 1 gem for a 5 gem item and 2 gems. So this guy gives you twice the economy that I do, and 3 times the economy that a normal nation would get out of 5 gem items. So obviously this is huge. Earth Readers, pretty good. They can do a lot of your light buffing. Basically, you're going to have an Earth 3 who can do a bunch of casting. They're not terribly expensive. The Death Randoms can lead undead stuff too. And then we've got the Oni Shugo. This is what he got to expand with, so he's going to be expanding with these guys. Depending on his bless, they'll expand at different rates, but I don't know. Hopefully he fails an expansion. I think it's unlikely. Then he's got the Hanya, who Death 3, Fire 2, so that they can do a bunch of Banefire stuff. And then a little expensive for a Death 3, but not that bad. They're demons too. I don't know, it's a pretty good mage for the paths you're getting. And then they have the Prince Consort. I think this is his only cap-only mage. So, high air magic, and then water 2. Yeah, I guess it's primarily for the big air buffs. Yeah. In terms of his magic spells he gets, he's got Boar of Carnutes, which is going to give him a very good kind of like mid-late game option. And he's got Rescindance, which gives you the Fallen Angel, which is a pretty good super combatant chassis. So yeah, I would say this guy is super scary because he's going to be hard to attack. He's got bonus income. He's got good sacreds that are recruit anywhere. He's going to be pretty hard, I think, to kill. I don't know what his bless will be, but we'll see. This is probably the player I'm most scared of out of everybody. And I think I'm fortunate enough to neighbor him also. Next, we have W.B. Yeats. This is the god of Basenji. And it's basically a Troll Elf Alliance nation. And I think their base nation, let me check. Yeah, I think their base nation is Jotunheim, so they're kind of my cousins in terms of the base nation, so they're going to enjoy cold. I think they can also put up Illwinter, though they may be relying on me to do that. They've got the Veti Hag, which is a very, very cheap mage. So just by virtue of being cheap, especially if you take magic scales, they're very efficient researchers. The astral ones make great fluffers. The death ones can, add value just by spamming out a few skeletons. Nature ones are pretty good fluffers and swarm casters, and then blood ones are cheap blood hunters. So they're pretty good. They're cheap and disposable. The bard is a spy, which is kind of useful, and then stealthy nature with a little bit of leadership is nice. The troll shaman are pretty damn solid. So they're kind of like the younger cousins of the troll Sethbinders. But I don't know if he got I wonder if he got the chorus. Let me see. No, he got Olm Conclave, which gives you the little mind blasters, and I think consoles again for his spells. But yeah, I was thinking maybe I think they have to be spell singers anyway. I'm not sure what he's going to use these guys for. I guess the death ones can do soul vortex, the death randoms. The nature ones can do personal regen, and the earth ones are maybe even your best thugs because they can do iron skin and stuff like that. So I guess these guys are like light thugs. I'm not totally sure how he's planning on using them. The Troll Kings are just good in their own right. They're not terribly expensive for Earth 3. And then they've got 15 regen built in. If you take care of the fire weakness, they're pretty damn good. These guys can definitely be like on the low end of super combatants where they can kill player armies of shit without much mage support. So that's like on the very, very low end of super combatanting. But they're going to require a fair amount of gear. They're not like efficient super combatants. And they're not like full-on super combatants where they're going to just destroy player armies that don't have mage support specifically designed to counter them. Like a player army with like really good guys like Van Heers or with like a lot of mages is probably just going to kill a Troll King. So they're not like really a super combatant, but they kind of can. Bean Sids. These guys have glamour, which is nice. They're spell singers. I'm not necessarily a fan of them. The randoms they get, basically they're going to get 2 of one of these paths and with a chance of earth. Probably not a fan. I mean, you can get them anywhere. But I don't know. I don't know how he's planning on using them. I haven't put a ton of thought into it. There's nothing that jumps out at me that says this is how I would use them. The Melissa is it's a healer, so this is just adding a healer to the lineup, which is nice. Particularly good with these trolls. They don't have recuperation, but with regeneration, they're going to kind of take a lot of hits and not die, hopefully. And so it's nice to be able to get some afflictions off of them. So I think that's a good pickup for a troll nation. The Ancestor Smith, pretty good just because you get a forge bonus, and then you get a nice array of randoms here. So very good to have, and then they're very useful as a mage. Like the Death 2s can do, a horde of skeletons. The Earth randoms are going to be really high in Earth to do. Oh, you don't get Earth randoms, but all of them are Earth 2, which means they can do Legion of Steel, Strength of Giants, that kind of stuff. And then even with Earth Boots, they can do Army of Gold. So anyway, very good to have, but I guess you have the Troll King for a lot of the Earth stuff. Probably this guy's mostly for Forge duty. The Sid Lords, these are good thugs. So stealthy thugs are nice to have in the arsenal. The Troll Seth Berender. Some of these, the Astral ones, can can teleport right away, but all these can teleport with the hat. And then they can Soul Vortex with the gem, they can Body Ethereal, they can Bark Skin. The Earth ones can do Iron Skin. These guys are probably teleporting thugs. They have built-in regen. They've got the fire weakness, but it's not that bad. You can easily kind of deal with it, even just by casting Elemental Fortitude here. Or Temper Flesh gets rid of it in a hurry. Which honestly, the Troll Kings, they can Temper Flesh too, and then you don't really have a lot of problems there either. But yeah, pretty useful. You can jump in communions, you can do Skelly Spam, or you can Thug. So very good unit, I think. Very, very reasonably priced. Next we have the Architect, can upgrade buildings, which is good. And then we have the Tuatha Sorceress to drop big air magic. The troops, kind of cool. We've got the Daon Sid, which is a sacred kind of Furblug type warrior. And yeah, they're pretty damn good. especially with a nice little light bless. And then you've got the Tuatha Warrior, which is like basically a heavier version, more money, but better. And they're sacred. I mean, they're glamored, so you don't know where these guys are. These guys are recruit anywhere, and these guys are cap only. So, anyway, I think this is a pretty good army. And then we've got, like these guys are stealthy glamour. These guys are stealthy glamour. So there's a lot of glamour stuff going on up here. And then they've also got the war troll for like a big troll army coming through. These guys are kind of expensive, but they're really good. The only real weakness is 10 fire or susceptibility, which is a big deal, but they're solid. They're damn solid. So anyway, I think this is a strong nation. It'll be interesting to see how they play. Let me double check what their magic is. Their magic is Contact Akanok or something, and I think that is a flying Holy 3, but my memory could be incorrect. And then they also got the chorus stuff, so they can do basically Nature Communion. So that goes ahead and tells us what they were going to get the BNCs for. So this guy, they can now basically do communions, where they're going to be able to do big air stuff, big water stuff, big nature stuff. And yeah, any other spellsingers can jump in. And presumably the bard now is going to be the communion slave. So basically they can have big communion slaves with bards, and then these guys as casters or something like that. Now the thing about chorus communions is you can't do turbo communions, because if they start taking damage, they drop out of the communion. So you can never kill your communion slaves, but you can't really take advantage of turbo communion mechanics. So it'll be good, but I don't know if it'll be super duper powerful. But anyway, I think they have a lot of flexibility with what they can do. They have a lot of stealth, they have a lot of glamour, they have a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of stuff they can do. So, I dig. And we're finally getting towards the bottom. We have Golden Boy, who is... Okay, so this is a nation I think is based on LA Arco, Magheim. And, yeah, let's take a look at the units. We've got the Monk, which is a... basically, you can research without ever having a lab. Without building a lab to get these guys. You just build them with temples, and I think they're foreign recruit even. Does it say that? Yeah, it can be recruited outside of Fort Walls. So basically, you can poop out a temple. It'd be actually really cool if they picked a nation like Pangaea or something with reduced temple costs. You could just poop out a temple and then make these guys, and then yeah, they research, and they're stealthy, which is kind of cool, because you basically can have stealthy preachers to do some Dominion warring. They've got illuminated ones, who are stealthy astral mages, which is nice to have in general, but they're also spies, so you can see score graphs, so that's pretty cool. They have the Seth Kona, which are really good. One of the better communion mages in the game. So this is probably going to be the workhorse mage of the nation. Yeah, very, very good in communions, because basically they're one of the best... If you only have one mage, it's probably one of the best Skelly Spam mages in the game, because basically you get Elemental Fortitude on all your communion slaves, you get Personal Regen on them. The only problem with them is they're 9 HP, so they only regen 1 per turn, which is pretty weak. But you don't have to worry about bringing other mages to the communion or anything like that, and if you micro it, you can do enlarge on your communion slaves and they'll be better, but anyway. Next we have the Colossi Weaver. These have a forge bonus, and yeah, they're basically just good units. They can jump in the communion and do a bunch of air shenanigans too, and then earth shenanigans as well, and fire. Basically, they can do a bunch of shenanigans in communion. So they're adding a bunch of diversity, but you kind of got to get a fair amount of them. And they also are forge bonus. So a lot of things you're getting out of the Colossi Weaver, and they're cheap. So I dig the Colossi Weaver. I was thinking about getting them. They were on my short list. I think they were open, but I chose not to get them. You've got the Catonian Reanimator that starts with the Solus, which is nice for assassinations, and then they can reanimate. So these are pretty good at basically just crapping out undead. And then they've got the Gaija, which is pretty good. You can also throw them into communions, because you get a pretty good chance of having an astral random. And then they can, you know, do this stuff like blood with reinvigoration. They're also pretty good at like fluffing, though they're kind of expensive for that job. Yeah, you probably could even thug with them if you had to, but they're not efficient at it, I don't think. But yeah, these guys are good. I'm not sure I would get them. I feel like they're a little overpriced. Like, you're paying a lot for pretty good stats that you don't always end up using or needing. They're fortune tellers, which is nice too, but the pole marks, these are cap only, which kind of sucks, but otherwise they're very good units. So very thuggable, very good leaders too, and combat caster's kind of nice too. You have the Archon Oppressor, so these guys are presumably made to jump into communions of being led by either... These are probably the communion slaves, honestly. And then these are going to be the communion masters, or I don't know. Honestly, I think that it's better just to make Seth Kona and entirely for the communion, because the fatigue hit you're going to get from like using these guys as slaves, I think is too much. People may disagree. You have the Archon Oppressor, so yeah, he's basically just going to... He's got a communion master built in. So he's going to bring a bunch of other stuff to the communion. Honestly... You can get a lot of this stuff through the Colossal, like if you have enough of the Colossi Weavers. But I guess it's nice to have it guaranteed. And then Taskmaster's kind of good, but probably better to just have a pole mark with really good leadership. And these guys are just phenomenal generals. And then they have the Enkidu Shaman, which can be recruited. I guess you can only get them in non-fort provinces, but they're basically like a pan. That you get outside of a fort, and they're not slow to recruit. So you get a lab, you get them every turn. Basically, there's a lot of options for just pooping out a lab or a temple, and you can get researchers. And these guys are really good. So anyway, pretty cool mage lineup. I like it. Not a ton of redundancy, which is good. Yeah, and they can do a lot of things, but. You know, they've got this guy who can do a lot without really needing a communion, and then they've got a lot which really probably would rely on a communion for being effective. They've got Helot Warriors, which are just cheap chaff. Good siege chaff per $1. They've got Black Plate Infantry, so these are the really heavy Ulm infantry. I think some other people had this, but I think it was the lighter armored version. But they hit really hard with the flail. Very good unit. They've got the Savaran Guard, which is one of the Ragan units. They've got a lot of different attacks. They've got the Lance... for the charge bonus, then they've got a broadsword and a hoof, and a composite bow. They're also bodyguards, which is nice, and they've got fire resistance. So these guys can do it. They're very, very versatile, and then they've got shields. Just a good unit. Very good unit. But they're expensive. And then they have the Therag Communicant. So, okay, this is obviously what they were planning for their communion. So I guess you could have a ton of them. The thing is, they're kind of expensive, 50 gold. Like, if you just want to take gold, like, the thing is, you're not going to use a commander turn for this, but if you just want to take gold and turn it into an efficient communion, Seth Kona are going to be way better communion slaves than communicants. And that's because you're not going to get, they're going to take way less, basically, fatigue or HP damage, because they are actually going to have the same paths as the Seth Kona masters. So, it's going to be pretty good, but I don't know if it's great. If you were going to, yeah. I don't know. I mean, Therag Communicants are generally agreed by everybody to be really strong. So it's a good pickup. It's a good thing to have, but I don't know if I'm personally a huge fan of it. We have the Jotun Skin Shifters, which are pretty good. They're very resource-efficient expanders. They're cap only, but they're pretty good units. You can also use these guys as kind of Soul Vortex Communion Slave Batteries, I imagine is actually what he's probably going to do. But they're good units in general, too. They don't have very high attack density, which kind of sucks. But like if you have these guys in a front line and you have the Black Plate Infantry streaming in through the sides, probably be pretty good. The spells they took. They took a Grand Lemur, which is the... it's like 50 death gems, I think, for one. But they get like Death Astral and then some other random cross paths. So they're really good, but they're kind of expensive. They come online later, or they're more useful later once you have better research. The consoles are kind of better early, but yeah, they're good. And then they've got Rescindance, which is also going to come online later. It's the Fallen Angel, or Recandescence. I'm not actually, I think it's Rescindance, but I'm not sure. Anyway, they've got a good super combatant chassis through that, so that's cool. How do I feel about this nation? I feel like there's a little bit of redundancy just in the communion, like who's going to be communion slaves? Like, is this guy a communion slave? Is this guy a communion slave? But, you know, you could potentially have Skelly Spam communions with just Seth Kona and then different armies with just Astral communions. They've got a bunch of good, like, just with the Colossi Weavers and the Archon Oppressors, they can get a lot of the important buffs off in communion. So I think they've got a lot of good things. They've got good early research with being able to do, like, non-fort recruit stuff. But the benefit of that kind of wanes later in the game when, like, as you're getting raided, you don't really want to get your temples raided or your labs raided because they could get, you know, destroyed if they hold it for one turn. But I guess actually labs being cheap and then having a recruit out of fort thing could be really good. So, I don't know. I feel like this is pretty strong. They've got good troops. They're going to have, like, research that starts to scale without them getting forts up. Yeah, it seems like a strong nation to me. I think a lot of this is going to come down to how it's played. But yeah, seems good. It seems good. I feel like these guys might have gotten a bad rating. Summer, the guy who put it together, did like a rating system for all these. Let me see what he actually rated these guys. Yeah, I just looked at what Summer said for this, and I don't really agree with much of what he said. But, like, it said, there's not good early game strategies, and, like, I don't know, you can shit out a bunch of these guys. They have javelins. Anybody with javelins that you can shit out for 8 gold, that's going to be half upkeep. Like, that's going to be, like, you've got really good siege chaff that hits pretty hard. I mean, they have shitty morale, but as long as you've got a taskmaster like a Polemark leading them, they're going to be fine. Kind of fine. I mean, I'm playing Macone, and I've got people running like little bitches every time. And these guys, once you're not resource constrained as much, you poop these guys out, they're going to be pretty good versus a lot of things. 21 damage lance. That will pop a lot of like Anakite type rushes if you've got a lot of these guys. And then I don't think these guys have enough attack density to really be good against a lot of things. The thing this will be good at is if you're fighting things with like a very defensive oriented bless or something to just chip through indies. Like, these guys are going to hit pretty hard, and then once they go in their werewolf form, they'll hit even harder. But they also take buffs really well. So I don't know. I think like they've got a pretty clear path to expansion. Like maybe just using Hillet Warriors, honestly. And then as they get their cap circle cleared, they switch to like Savannah Guard or Savarnan, however you say that guard, and Black Plate Infantry. And then you get a pretty solid early army. And then, like, Summer also said that research would be bad, but they've got 250 gold labs, and then they can make these guys who are only 2 recruitment points. So every other turn, they get somebody who can research 13 without ever having to put a fort up. And by the way, they're great mages. So, like, honestly, like, imagine dropping Strength of Giants on top of these guys, which happens really early, and Legions of Steel, and all of a sudden they're like, 14 or 12, 13 protection, whatever it is, and then 22 damage on like an 8 gold unit and the javelins take the strength buffs as well too, so it's going to be like a 16 damage piercing. I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad. Yeah. Anyway, there's good stuff here. I think this is a pretty good nation. I think some are listed as like C tier, which I don't really agree with. I think you could get a pretty strong playthrough with these guys. Okay, what next? I think we just did the Golden Boy. We only have 2 left. We have Antonio Gutierrez, which is going to be interesting. Okay, so this is based off of Patala as the underlying nation, and I'm not totally sure. I haven't really gone and like looked at like all the Patala stuff and why they would pick it, but they're gonna get all the Bandar stuff, and so they should get. I think they get all the Lankan summons if they get any blood guys, which they do have. So they're gonna get all the Lankan summons. They're gonna get all the Bandar log summons, like the cool astral stuff. So anyway, they get a lot of cool stuff just that comes with being Patala. If we look at their troops, they've got Rotarius, which are pretty sick. They've got crossbowmen, which are going to be good. They've got Siege Chaff, which is okay. They've got Eagle Warriors. And then they've got just cheap frontline units that are bodyguards. So I guess this is kind of some assassin help. And then also arrow screens. And then they've got, and these will also be pretty good at expanding. And then they've got the Yuan Cavalry, which have crossbows. Basically, I think these are heavy barb cavalry, but I could be kind of wrong. But basically, they've got good bows, and then they've got a fair amount of damage that they can do in melee, and then decent armor. So you can also pillage, but I don't know if they're going to be doing that much. It's not where you get them. So anyway, pretty good heavy cav option. That's pretty versatile. And then they've got Radiated Arabians. So then is this their only sacred? No, they've got Eagle Warriors, which they can recruit anywhere, and then they've got a cap only sacred. So presumably they're going to take a Bless. That's pretty good. I'm not sure what they're going to take, but there's a lot of things you can do with these guys. These guys are sick. They've got Heat Aura, and then Firepower, and then they've got... you only fit 2 per square, but they just do so much damage. So these are like anti-elite. So anyway, there's a bunch of options that are, I think, fulfilling different roles. You've got 2 anti-elites. You've got sacred, so there's a recruit anywhere sacred and a cap only sacred, so you're getting some benefit of having a good bless. You've got a flying option. You've got good crossbows. You've got good siege chaff. You've got your anti-elites. You've got your heavy cav, which are pretty versatile because they can shoot too. Okay, looking at troops, we've got a cheap commander. We've got a blood mage for blood hunting, which at first you may be like, well, what are we going to do with blood hunting? Well, we've got all of the Lonkin stuff we can get. They've got Inaris, which are basically like Seth Kona, but they're more expensive, but they start off with higher death. So I think it's up for argument who's the better Skella Spammer. Probably in smaller communions, these guys are better because you're going to have higher death access. In larger communions, the Seth Kona are probably better because that additional... You're paying kind of premium for that extra death path because they are more expensive. But these guys do not need to be in a communion, which means when they get assassinated, they're going to do better too. So that's a bonus. We've got the Magister Arcane, and these guys are pretty nice because... basically they can jump into the communions with the Inari. And they can drop... summon Earth Power, which is going to be really nice, and then they can do a bunch of air buffs. So, a bunch of things they can do. They've also got Fire, which I'm not sure what fire buffs they would want to do, but... well, they've got Archer, so they could do the Fire randoms, which you're going to have some. You're not going to have a lot of, but the Fire randoms can do flaming arrows and stuff. But these guys are probably actually going to be the ones who are going to be doing your fire casting. These are Bakemono sorcerers, so these you can twice born, and then they make decent thugs. I wouldn't really call them super combatants, but some would argue with me and probably say they're super combatants. But yeah, anyway, they're thugs, they're good casters, they can skelly spam, they can do acid, any of the fire, water, crosspath stuff, which is pretty important. They can do your earth buffs for your army. This just, it's a really good, well-rounded sorcerer, and then they can thug, and generally you're going to twice born them, so you get some extra mileage out of them. And then they've got an assassin, the Empoisoner, who's a pretty good assassin. They can do skelly spam, or they can do swarm. And then we have the Star Spawn. This is the cap-only Star Spawn of Relay. And basically they're just really high in Astral, and then they get a bunch of cool crosspaths. Not totally sure that I'm fully on board for this guy, because I feel like you can do almost everything else without him. The only thing, like, this guy's going to add water to your communion. And, I mean, these guys can teleport, which is maybe the main value. These guys can cloud trapeze. So you could do, like, a teleporting cloud trapezing little communion with these guys and attack some province, or... like, these guys can teleport alone, and they're pretty good for, like, enslaved mind stuff, but... yeah, I don't know. They're okay. Not super huge on that pickup, but it's okay. For their spells... they got Heavenly Fires, which I think is a astral... Okay, I forgot what it is. I think it's an astral spell that burns undead. And then they also got... I think they got the Lemur Console. Yeah, they got the Lemur Console. So presumably, there's so many Lemur Consoles in this. It's going to be important to have a mid-game strategy to deal with them. Unfortunately, I have one. But anyway, that is that. So what do I think of this nation? I think they have a lot of flexibility in their front line. With a good Bless, you know, they have a lot of different threat vectors in terms of stuff they can do. I think the right answer is probably taking like a light Bless that would benefit both of these. You're going to have late game is secured with Blood. You've got really good Blood Hunters. And then mid game they got really good Communions. Yeah, I mean, I think having good Sacreds and then jumping into Inari Communions, like with a little bit of Summon Earth power, I think is pretty solid. And then as the game opens up, you get a lot of buffs with your Magister Arcane. So, yeah, I think these guys are pretty solid. I think they can deal with the Sacred Rush. I think they have good mid game with Skelly Spam. And then they've got good late game with the blood stuff, and then good buffs from the Magister Arcane. So yeah, I think they've got, and they can probably take Drain, because this guy's Drain immune. So it's like 3 free scales, and just use this guy as the Researcher. Though you probably want to have more Inari than you want to have Magister Arcanes, but and good Assassins. Yeah, I think this is, I mean, you know, could this nation win? I think they could win. But we'll see. I think what I'm saying is, I think a lot of this is going to come down to, for a lot of, some of the nations aren't great, but a lot of nations are in the category with, it's going to have more to do with how they play than with like the units they picked. And I think this nation's definitely in that category, so. I think Summer also didn't give this one a good rating, but I think it's okay. Okay, and that brings us to the last one, which is Vesta. And let's go ahead, I need to figure out which one this comes from. Okay, so this is based on Late Age Fulero. And he wanted to do like a Roman theme. I think I made him his flag. So he's got gladiators, which are pretty damn good. Pretty good anti-elite. He's got efficient crossbowmen, high precision crossbows on stealthy units that hurt in melee. These are the Olmish crossbows. And then he's got another kind of crossbow, which is going to be better in cases where you're expecting a lot of return fire with the Princeps. And these are basically Tower Guard or some variety of them. And then we have the, I'm not exactly sure, the base troop. This is just a Roman troop that's pretty damn solid. So these guys are going to be really good at expansion once you have some resources. And then they've got Movark Knights, which are obviously the shit. And you can recruit them in your capital even if you're on land. So that is pretty sick. So I'm not sure what he's going to do for expansion. He's also got a Wolfherd. So there's a bunch of expansion options. He can do the crossbow Wolfherd expansion. You saw me doing my Ulm series. He can do expansion with these guys. Maybe not for his first party, but later once he gets some more resources. Or he could do a Movark Knight expansion. But with these Movark Knights, he's definitely going to be a threat underwater against the ghosts. Because they're going to be hard for the ghost to hit and their magic damage. So anyway, hope these guys border the ghosts. That would be nice for me. For commanders, he's got this guy who's a Nature 1. And I think he took Chorus, so like Nature Communions. So these guys can be Communion slaves. This guy's an Elegies too, so he's good for calling gods back. And he's got this guy who's a Spellsinger. Presumably, this guy can do Skelly Spam out of Nature Communions. So he also can add Summon Earth Power, which is pretty good. Reinvigoration is really important in Nature Communions because when your guys get out of fatigue, they're no longer Communion slaves. So there's that. You have the Peator, who this can be a Blood Hunter or a Fire Mage, and then they're good priests. You have this guy. Yeah, I think this is the Shiniyama Mage. But yeah, they basically, you get a bunch of random crosspaths. I don't know how he's going to use them. Some people like them. I'm not a huge fan. But I guess you probably have a bunch of... I'm not going to go through and analyze what all the cross paths are. Some of them are probably pretty useful, but I don't know. He has the Buddha, which is one of the better mages in the game. So stealthy skelly spammers, always fun. And then potentially even kittable out to be like light thugs. And then Forge bonus 2, which is huge. So definitely a huge pickup. That was kind of on... I don't know if I put that on my list, but it probably should have been. They also have Dryads for seduction and assassination, and they have Perfectus, which are, of course, able to spell sing, so he can jump in and do big thunder strikes as part of his choir communions. Wolf herds for chaff generation. I think Summer said I was reading his description just as I flipped through, but they have wolf herds but no blood, and he definitely has blood access. Like these guys, you can crap them out, and half of them are blood hunters. So it's not like a great blood economy, but they definitely have a blood economy. And then he's got wolf herds, presumably for mostly siege staff, but also for patrolling. And then he has druids. These are really good. So these can jump in and do big earth buffs as part of their communion. So I think the druids can join the choir. I'm pretty sure they can. Yeah, they can join the choir communions, but yeah. So anyway, they can jump in, they can do Gifts of Heaven and stuff even without it. And honestly, I mean, these guys can get up to Earth 4 without any items, right? Power the spheres, summon Earth power, boom, they're Earth 4. They can do all the big stuff. So, very good unit. What do I think about this nation? Oh, let me check their spells real quick. Yeah, so they have the Choir, and then the other one was Brood of Garm. And I forget what that does. It's either going to give big wolves or big boars. I can't remember which ones. But they're sacred. Okay, so what do I think? Do they have stealthy commanders? They have this guy. Yeah, presumably this guy... You could come up with some scripts which would be pretty nasty with this guy with 15 rangers. So, and then this guy's stealthy too. So, I think they have a fair amount of kind of stealthy rating options. They've got really good ranged. And then ranged with Skelly Spam Choir Communions could be pretty scary. Especially once they have Earth Power on them. Which... yeah, this guy can do. So... yeah, they've got Stealthy Buddha's rating. So they've got... I think they've got a pretty good stealth threat. They've got Skelly Spam coming out pretty early. They've got Movarks, which are just a pain in the ass to deal with. They've got Thunderstrike stuff they can do. And all this stuff comes online pretty early. And then as later things come out, like all the big army buffs, they can do most all that too. Fog Warriors, Mass Flight, Wind Guide. Presumably some of these guys can do... I guess you'd probably take your Fire Random Buddhas and do Flaming Arrows. So yeah, I think they can do a lot of stuff in the early game. They have anti-elites. They're a little weak. Like, these guys are not as good as the other kinds of gladiators. And then there's not a ton of... I mean, crossbows are kind of anti-elite, but not great. So, anyway. I think this is a solid nation. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see kind of what they do. But yeah, I'd say after looking through all of this, there's a few things that jump out. I think I'm still, like, by far the most scared of the Satis group. Mostly from the income bonus, and then the Sacreds everywhere. I think that can be really good. Aside from that, I think there's a lot of people kind of in a middle tier. Like, I think maybe some of us who can reanimate have a little bit better of a leg up. I think I'm at a leg down from not picking a good expander, so we'll see if I can get around that. If I have an okay early expansion and I can make it into the mid game, I think I have as good a shot as anybody else at winning. But yeah, I think it'll be a fun game. So anyway, that is an overview of all the different nations. If you want to put in the comments who you think will win, who you think has the stronger nation, please do. I will do one last selling point for me and why I kind of thought about mine, because looking at mine, it doesn't feel quite as strong. There's a few things that I have going for me that I think are going to be pretty damn good. One is I can do Illwinter, which is going to give me a big advantage over a lot of the Fire Nations in terms of income. And it's also going to make me easy to expand with like anybody that doesn't have cold resistance can be in some trouble. So that's one of the reasons. It's just like the income I get from like cold 3 if I get Ill Winter out, which will be in the late game, is huge. That, and then I've got really efficient mages. And then the giants I get are, I think I have the best. Like, you could argue Hinnom giants are better for like Long Dead, but if you take into account the Solus I get, I think like I have better stuff. Anyway, and then turn 1 mass flight is huge. So I don't know. It'll depend. If I can get where I get like 4 forts making these guys where the resource issues isn't a big deal, I'm gonna feel pretty confident. But yeah, I don't think I have the strongest nation necessarily. But if I can get through the early game okay, and I get some forts up, and I get a fair army produced, I'm feeling pretty good. Pretty good. I can also use my undead giants as bodyguards, and they'll function pretty good in that role, I think. Like, they'll do pretty good against Swarm, because they don't take poison damage. And then my guys can do Skelly spam. Like my Thaumaturgs. Not like that good Skelly spam, but a little Skelly spam. Anyway. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know below who you think is strong. Tell me who you thought was the strongest nation, and then which of the nations you think looks the most fun to play. Anyway, take care, guys.